How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to your favorite weekly horoscope, this time for September 20th through September 26th of 2021. My name is Cam White, and thank you guys so much for being here, liking my videos, sharing my videos when you do, commenting. I love when you guys actually talk to me and let me know what's going on. Even though I haven't been interacting, I still do read the comments, even though I probably shouldn't read the comments. Anyway, and thank you for being here and watching this. I have to start off with saying how incredibly dumb I am and how sorry I am. I figured out my microphone problem. If you just started watching my videos, you've probably noticed how awful my audio has been for the past couple weeks, and it's because I didn't have my freaking microphone setting right. Like, it was recording with my computer, and I thought I knew what I was doing. I didn't. I'm so sorry because I made your guys' ears bleed for so long, and I literally didn't know what the problem is. But I'm just really dumb sometimes. When I found out what the problem was, it was just one of those things where you just realize, like, you question everything. You're like, what else am I not paying attention to? Anyway, I fixed the microphone problem. The audio should be a little bit better. I also changed my background a little bit more, so I hope you guys like this view because this is probably how it's going to stay for a while, and I really like this background. But yeah, you're pretty much seeing my whole fucking house. But anyway, this week, let's bring up the thingamajigger here, whatever. What should we call this? Should I call this like the notes? I don't know what to call this little list that I make. Anyway, this week, as you can see, I use the color purple for Venus and Scorpio. But this week, we actually have a lot of highlights this week. And, I really didn't know exact thumbnail to make for this video because I usually try to match up the thumbnail to how I think the emotion of this week is going to be. And last week, I had a really dramatic face because I thought last week was really dramatic. And there was a lot of problems as we started last week and kind of got to wrapping it up. This week's a little bit different because there's like just a lot going on. It's both good and bad depending on, who you are and who you ask. But we're starting this week off on Monday with the full moon in Pisces and Mercury trining Jupiter. And as you could tell, I wrote that down as there's like 4 or 5 highlights this week, but we're starting this week off with a highlight. Let me go ahead and pull up the chart. Here we go. This is the moment right now. Of course, I'm recording this right when Venus is squaring Saturn. Let me move this forward a little bit so we can get a better view. Anyway, there we go. Monday. We're starting Monday off with the full moon in Pisces. Now, I'm kind of a broken record when it comes to a lot of these transits, but life is cyclical. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't, every year you see on spiritual social media how it's like the full moon and it's always some portal and it's always no, it's not. Full moons, new moons happen every fucking month. It's really not that special. If anything, it's the most mundane transit. I really hate when people like really emphasize new moons or full moons because they're literally the most cyclical, most common astrology transit. Anyway, full moon in Pisces. When we're talking about full moons and we're talking about the sun and the moon, we're talking about luminaries. We're talking about what is lit up. The moon, which represents what is hidden, what represents what is inside of us. We have to usually feel what's inside of us. We can't always see what's going on inside of us, right? We have to feel it. The moon, what does the moon do, guys? That's right. It lights up the night. It lights up the dark. It lights up what we don't always have the opportunity to see. When you go out at nighttime, if we were going to think thousands of years ago when astrology and, the sun and the moon were much more important into people's daily lives, if you were to go outside at night on a new moon, you wouldn't have been able to see anything. It would have been really dark and really scary versus on a full moon, you can go outside and you can see much more. And think about that metaphysically for a moment. What does it mean to see things that are usually dark and hidden to be illuminated, right? And the moon is simply just reflecting the sun's light. The sun is in Virgo. We've been paying attention to detail. We've been getting organized. We've been getting more, I don't want to say materialistic as if it's like, that's our faith, but like more focused on the material, if anything. And the sun does rule the ego, so our egos can be much more tied to the material world. But this full moon's in Pisces, right? I've said this last year, and I really like this analogy, so I'm going to stick with it. But Virgo is like knowing all of your notes, or, rather than the music analogy that I did last year, and I think I talked about it last week, let me do a different analogy. Let me talk about creative writing. I'm not a creative writer. I've had to do a lot of creative writing in my day, but for the writers that are out there, you guys could probably understand that you have a certain tools in your toolkit, right? Certain things, or even if you're a mechanic out there, you've got all of the tools in your toolkit, but not for the job that you need, this full moon in Pisces, it may not require, a specific tool, but it might require the utilization of that tool, right? Just because you know how to make how to do alliteration, that doesn't mean you're going to just put alliteration into your creative writing thing just for shits and gigs, right? Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. So we're talking about integration. We're talking about faith, spirituality, blending things together. And this is the moon, right? With the sun in Virgo, and we're really looking at what tools do we have in our toolbox? And now that our tools, if you're anything like me and you're kind of like a clean, I've really turned into a clean freak over the years, and I'm really organized now with a lot of my stuff. But the reason you want things to be organized is so you don't have to question where things are. Any of them, I don't know how many mechanics follow me. If you're a mechanic, that's crazy that you know astrology. But anyway, mechanics understand this because you want to have the right, because when you need that tool, you need to know where it's at, right? It's the same thing. I used this analogy last year when it comes to the full moon in Pisces being about knowing your musical notes, knowing your scales, knowing your chord progressions. And then when you actually play the music, it's about integrating all that but you're not just going to integrate everything that you're going to kind of blend it all together in a whimsical manner. And this full moon in Pisces is kind of like, hey, now that all of your tools are organized, now that you have your creative writing process down, now that you know your scales, whip something up. Time to whip it up. Now that for example, as a guitarist, I've literally just been working on this new scale, and it's literally shown me this new way of playing with my guitar, and I'm having so much more fun playing guitar right now that I know this scale. And that's what this full moon in Pisces is. When you are, strict in your knowledge and you're strict, you're disciplined, you're focused on learning something, it's for the opportunity to actually begin to apply it, right? And applying things really just this is something Rhetorius talks about in oh my gosh, trad nerds. What's Rhetorius's book? I forgot. Rhetorius is a really old Egyptian from thousands of years ago, and he's pretty much one of the first texts that we have that says why Mercury and Jupiter don't work well in each other's signs. Because as you guys know, Mercury's in detriment in Pisces, Mercury's in detriment in Sagittarius. And I love talking about this because Jupiter rules abundance, right? Jupiter rules, it's fine, anything's possible. It rules faith and idealism. And Rhetorius even brings this up. Abundance is literally opposed to logic. And logic and rationality is opposed to faith and idealism. And so one of the things why I'm bringing this up, because when we talk about Pisces and Virgo, rationally thinking, we might have this, rationally speaking, right? You only have so many notes on a guitar, right? Or even so many notes on a piano. But then when you're thinking about, Jupiter, it's we can combine certain notes and we can, make different harmonies that might sound weird. But this is a full moon, right? This is about realizing that it's more than just the tools that you use, and it's about how do you use those tools that you have? How are you integrating them into your system? Are you seeing things through a different way? This is the full moon. This is lighting up the night, right? This is the opportunity for us to see things in a different way and see how we can bring things together in a different way. We have all of the right tools. We just got to be able to see the thing. And that's what we start this week off with on Monday. It's this full moon. It's hey, and this is the full moon in Pisces. In order to see it, you got to feel it, right? The full moon in Pisces is you may not even be able to identify what you're feeling. You might just be feeling it in general. Well, anyway, we start off with that full moon, but we also have Mercury trining Jupiter on Monday. Now, I'm a little hesitant to say that I love this simply because we're going to come right back to this. Mercury is going to trine Jupiter again when Mercury is retrograde next week. So don't get your hopes up with anything here. But Mercury, again, is all about communication, messaging, rationale, our thought, and it's in Libra. So it's wanting to do things through this Venus way of being nice, being fair, playing by the rules, doing what's right and what's just. Venus is in Scorpio, so that might be a little challenging and we might be a little edgy. But Mercury is trining Jupiter while Jupiter's retrograde, where this is kind of hey, olive branch being extended here. Do you want to work with this? Do you want to integrate with things? I think Mercury trining Jupiter is really kind of like that message of like, hey, this is what I got for you. And that's really it. Do you accept that for what it is? Do you accept me for how I am? You know what I mean? I think Mercury in Libra trining Jupiter is our ideas are also, Mercury is about our thoughts and our ideas, right? And our rationale behind things. And with Mercury in Libra, the rationale has to be, it's got to be right. It's got to look good. It's got to be within the system. It's got to be within the rules. And I think as Mercury is thinking that way, and as Mercury is trining Jupiter, this is kind of being able to see the loophole with things, right? For example, our politicians love finding little loopholes, and same thing with the corporations. They love finding little tiny loopholes that make them, it's mental gymnastics to pretty much get them to do whatever the fuck they want anyway. That's pretty much like this energy right here. Like, this is the full moon in Pisces, right? If we're just a little bit open-minded, if we just take a step back and look at this through a different perspective than we're used to looking at, we might be able to find a loophole with this. And I think as Mercury's trining Jupiter, this is definitely about looking for the opportunity and finding the opportunity. I really like Monday. My only hesitancy with Mercury trining Jupiter is Mercury's going to be retrograding, coming right back to this. So while you might have thought on Monday that you found an idea, everything's working out good, that's not to say that that's not necessarily true. But there's context to it, right? We're going to come back to this, so just hold your horses and don't be making immediate plans for things. But I think about Monday in just a general sense of the word is really about looking at your options, looking at the bigger picture, and finding the opportunities where they lie. You have to be creative about it. Which brings us to Tuesday. When we go to Tuesday, that's when we're going to be having the moon then ingress into Aries. It technically ingresses into Aries later Monday night, but you're really going to feel it on Tuesday. But then also on Tuesday, Mercury squares Pluto. Now, if you guys have been following me, I don't really talk about Pluto all that much, simply because it's just not really the most helpful thing to talk about, and every time it comes up, you know what I mean? But I am bringing Pluto up because we're about to have America's Pluto return this winter and next year. The Venus retrograde on Pluto. Mercury is also going to retrograde over Pluto. It's actually, in fact, going to station direct on top of Pluto. So as we go into the fall and winter, a lot of these Pluto themes are going to continue and they're going to start coming back up again. So just really start paying attention. And that's why I noted Mercury squaring Pluto here. Pluto usually represents power structures. Pluto rules a lot of different things in a lot of different situations, but I'm bringing up Mercury squaring Pluto as there might be this power dynamic that you might struggle with when it comes to communication, right? Mercury in Libra is like, I want to do what's right, but if the thing that's wrong that you're supposed to do is being like held against you by a super high power, what are you going to do? Right? So I think Mercury squaring Pluto is really hard to weigh out your options, right? Because Pluto rules fear. Pluto, and here's the thing, Pluto does rule a lot of things, and what I really like to focus on in my readings is talking about how Pluto can just rule fear, right? It makes the small things big and the big things small, right? It's like this weird relationship with anxiety and fear. And I think as Mercury squaring Pluto, we might lean on one side to the other simply out of fear, simply out of being challenged. And I think this is going to be kind of challenging where our ideas, our thoughts, and even our communication might have to err on the side of caution simply because Pluto's in the room, right? I talked about last week. It's not really the week to stick to your guns. This is kind of last week was much more about just kind of dealing with it. And I think as Mercury squares Pluto, there's a little bit more to that. It's not so much as just to keep your mouth shut, don't say anything, but it's much more of like, hey, this is a very sensitive dynamic here, and you have to approach the situation like that. And I think as Mercury squares Pluto, something you say, something you think, as insignificant as it might be, might turn into something very powerful later on, right? So just be aware of what you're thinking about and why you're thinking about something, what side you're leaning on and why you are. Is it out of fear? Is it out of safety? Is it out of retaliation? Is it out of, revenge? It's just questions to ask yourself. I want you guys to be really, I talked a little bit about this in one of my podcasts about being self-aware. And I really think during these times with all of these hard transits and the hard transits we're going to go through this winter is about really being aware of your thought process. Something I think a lot about, and this is me just kind of going on a quick tangent, but I've been really trying to educate myself. Again, I've told you guys about this, about like my health and my nutrition, and something I'm really bad at doing. And I know a lot of you guys are probably bad at it too. panic doing things. Like sometimes like I'll go in and I'll have like a grocery list in my head and I'll say like, this is what I'm going to make, this is what I'm going to have. And then I go to the grocery store and I just like panic pick something up. Like when I first started, I used to not cook at all. I used to be a horrible cook and I just ate out all the time. And it was really awful. I cook mostly all my own meals now. And when I was first buying steak, I had no idea what was what. And I kind of would just like black out and just buy something, right? And then I'd get home and be like, what is this? Why did I buy this? What was I thinking? But I just kind of blacked out in that moment. And that's kind of like, certain like anxiety can do that to you. Certain fears can do that to you. You can, and this is the thing, it's designed that way. I did this the other day when I went to the stupid Converse store to go buy a new pair of Chucks. And it was like loud music and everyone's wearing masks and it was just like so chaotic that I just panic bought something. I got the wrong fucking size of shoe. I struggle with that all the time, and I've really been trying to work on it. But the reason I'm explaining this story to you guys is because that Mercury square Pluto is a really similar transit to that feeling of like thinking a certain way based off of fear, based off of also stuff that's out, like, for example, certain stores turn up the music more and they create an environment of chaos in order for you to like pretty much just pick things up out of fear and out of like uncertain, like just like out of automation, right? Just automatically picking it up. That's a part of the thing. So I think on Mercury squaring Pluto, just be aware of what you're thinking and what is causing that line of thinking, what is causing that line of questioning. And this is so important because Mercury is going to be squaring Pluto for quite some time, for like at least the next week at the minimum. You know what I mean? And so like this feeling isn't going to go away anytime soon. But the Mercury square Pluto really starts Tuesday night going into Wednesday, of course. But then also on Tuesday, the moon is going to go into Aries, where that full moon in Pisces, right? We have to like look at the bigger picture with our instrument. We have to look at the bigger picture of, same thing as if you're a mechanic, right? I like to play mechanic. Sometimes I play pretend and I try to work on my car. And it's something that, I'm not always the best at, but I at least try. And something that I've really learned from working on my own cars and doing it and, other problems is about diagnosing the problem, right? Just because you're, for example, what's a good example of this? Just because your car is low on oil, that doesn't mean that your car is burning more oil. Like, for example, I actually had this problem. This is why I'm bringing this up. My car was like out of oil and I was like it was like dry and I was like, well, I'm not leaking anywhere. It's not I drive a Jetta, so it's like not making any crazy noises. It's not showing any signs or whatever, but I had a leaky gasket or I had a broken gasket over like my whole fucking engine seal or something like that. And it was really expensive to replace. But anyway, it was one of those things where I could have just been like, let me just add more oil and, problem solved. But really it wasn't that. You have to ask, well, why was I losing the oil? Where was it going? And I'm bringing this up because that full moon in Pisces is about looking at the bigger picture, right? What is actually going on? Because you might just think, if this, then that, you know what I mean? And it might be much more complex than that. But I'm saying that because as the moon goes into Aries, this is about taking action, right? When you're working on your own car, you say, okay, well, if it's doing this, let me do that. And if that doesn't work, well, then let me do this next thing. You go over your checklist of, how to handle the problem, right? And this moon in Aries is the full moons in Pisces. This is kind of about like seeing the bigger picture, having your plan. And then the moon in Aries is just going after one thing after another of like, hey, is this the right solution? Is this the right solution? Is this the right solution? The moon on Tuesday, as it's in Aries, is going to go opposite Mars. And what's important about this is Mars is now in Libra. And I talked about this last week. There's this sense of indecision. There's this, guilt of having to do things more for other people and less for yourself. Mars in Libra, again, indecision, inaction, doing things that are much more better looking on the surface than what their actual intent of the action represents. And I think as the moon's in Aries, opposite Mars in Libra, there's going to be kind of a call out of that. Like, hey, are you doing things just to kind of make like, okay, is your mechanic just, if I took my car to the mechanic, they could have just topped it off with oil and said, fuck off. But that would have just been an on the surface fix. That wouldn't have actually been fixing the underlying issue. And I think as the moon's in Aries, we really got to, sometimes in order to get that issue, you kind of have to press people. And Mars is in Libra. It's going to be easy to be passive. It's going to be easy to just, try to put up a fight. And then and then it gets shut down. And you're like, fine, I don't want to argue with it. But that moon in Aries, opposite Mars in Libra, this isn't about like choosing violence or choosing peace or anything like that. But like, sometimes you kind of have to say, hey, like, well, your mechanic's kind of in the business of making sure your car's messed up. So you kind of have to egg them on and say like, hey, what about this? What about that? That moon in Aries is, again, the moon's our emotions, and we want to feel comfortable, right? We want to feel safe, and confronting things doesn't always feel like that, especially as the moon's opposite Mars in Libra. It's like, hey, I know that this is all peaceful, but I got to say something. I got to confront this. I got to say it with my chest. And I think on Tuesday, as Mercury squaring Pluto, moon opposite Mars, really, don't be too afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid. It's not about arguing. It's not about yelling. It's not about going, like that courtroom case, I talked about last week. It's not about freaking out. Like, you got people watching you, but don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to bring up something that's not truthful. And it's going to be a little bit difficult to confront those things, but that's just what we're doing, right? That moon is in Aries. We're going to be a little bit charged up. And it's opposite Mars in Libra. It's not going to come across the way that you want it to. And that's just how things are. You know what I mean? But you got to do what you got to do. Now, that brings us into, oh, hold up. Let's do the old switcheroo here. There we go. Which brings us to Wednesday. And as we get to Wednesday, as you guys can tell, it's really the only day that doesn't have too much going on. Yes, the sun is going to go into Libra, but the moon's going to go opposite Mercury. So not the biggest transits in the world. Pretty normal day, like most days. But the sun's going to go into Libra. So you're probably waiting for me to say that why I don't like this or why it's bad. I think the sun in Libra might be really good during this time. That is because the sun rules our ego. The sun rules how we want things to look, how we want to be, seen. And I think as the sun enters its sign of fall, right? Like literally fall begins, everything's starting to die, but we're in the process of like, oh, it's beautiful. Like, this is what I love about Libra, Scorpio, and Sag is like, it literally represents like death, like fall, like the leaves are changing. Scorpio's like everything's dying. But it's really pretty, like all the colors and, the aesthetic and the fall aesthetic, and everyone's peppermint mocha, pumpkin spice lattes. That's all the Libra stuff, right? All that aesthetic feel good stuff. And I think as the sun though goes into Libra, there's the sun in Virgo is kind of like, the but actually energy, right? Our ego is telling us that we know better, versus the sun is in Libra where it's like, hey, our ego might feel one way, but it's the sun in Libra. Like, who, as long as things are going good, who fucking cares? You know what I mean? I think as the sun enters Libra, like, we're going to feel a little bit more peaceful. We're going to feel a little bit more, like, less exaggerated, I think is a better way to put it. And, now we're also gearing up more towards the fall, at least here in Northern America. Now, on Wednesday, the moon is also going to go opposite Mercury. Now, I've kind of looked at this transit when I did my Mercury retrograde video, and I was really kind of curious about this one because it's right after that full moon. But as that moon's in Aries, right, where we're wanting to take like a sort of action and be very confrontive with how we feel, maybe even take a little, have some emotionally charged actions that we take, which I don't always recommend. But as that moon in Aries is opposite Mercury in Libra, is like, in a courtroom. I love using this court analogy. I might keep it while we're in Libra season. But when you're in a courtroom and you guys watch this shit on TV, like they have to ask those the witnesses and the defendants like really serious questions, like especially when it comes to like a case involving something really horrible. Like I was watching today the girls at the USA gymnastic thing, and the Larry Nassar thing that the FBI failed to investigate, and I was just like, how, like Simone Biles specifically was like, I can't imagine being her, like literally becomes this champion at like 18, has the whole world on top of her. Then I didn't even know she was a part of the Larry Nassar thing. Like that just blew my mind seeing her in front of Congress or whatever it was. But then going to the Olympics, having to shut down because she couldn't use her medication, like the amount of pressure this woman had to go through. Then to talk to in front of the most powerful people in the nation about how the most powerful, police investigation service failed them. And like, she had to just God, the amount of bravery of having to confront something that this woman's had to do, even though it caused chaos, right? Like Simone, like quitting the Olympics or not doing the Olympics because she was, that was a big deal. A lot of people made that a really big deal. And that tilted on the side of things, right? That was probably a really fucking hard decision for her to make. But this moon in Aries opposite Mercury and Libra is like, yo, she had to do what she had to do. She listened to her heart, and that dude, like fucking Simone Biles is like right now. After watching this Larry Nassar thing, I can't imagine going through all of that pressure she had to do on the media, then to go to Congress and then explain how the FBI failed her and all the other women, and just like it's insane. But anyway, the moon in Aries opposite that Mercury in Libra is so like, yo, it's not easy. In courtroom cases, those questioners, those examiners, they gotta ask tough questions that aren't easy to answer and that will invoke those emotions and that might stir up the peace a little bit. But you've got to do what you've got to do. And on Wednesday, while the sun's in Libra, yes, there is that sense of kind of like, okay, taking your ego out of it, but still having to confront something. The moon in Aries opposite Mercury in Libra is like, hey, I'm trying to keep the peace here, but this is how I fucking feel. And I can't, you got to be honest with your truth. You got to live your truth. If you're not living your truth, like, why are you even studying astrology? Like, go and live in fantasy land if you're not going to live your truth. Your chart will help you see what your truth is, right? Like, live that. Don't deny that, because the more that you deny it, the more problems you're going to get into, the more shit you're going to have thrown at you. And then you're going to be like, why is, the universe doing this to me? It's because you're not living your fucking truth. You're not living in integrity. My advice, I think, with this moon in Aries opposite Mercury and Libra is like, life's fucking tough. And sometimes, like, again, I can't imagine, like, if I was Simone Biles and I had to go in front of Congress to tell people, like, how, yeah, the guy who literally was my medic for this thing that launched me into this super amazing, successful career was actually, like, molesting me as a kid. Like, I wouldn't want to talk about that. I wouldn't want to be on, in front of Congress having to talk about it and then talk about how they failed you. Like, but she had to do what she had to fucking do because she was living her fucking truth. She had to drop out of the Olympics because she had to live her fucking truth. Like, that's integrity right there. That's how you guys should actually start acting. I look up to that type of shit. And this is one of those moments that calls that into question, that calls that into play. Are you willing to do that, right? Are you willing to confront how you feel about something at the risk of making everything not look as good as you want it to? That's a fucking hard call, but life is about making hard fucking choices. This is nothing, it's really frustrating. I'm thinking about making my next podcast episode about this, but like, I'm so over the spiritual bypassing and just the fake, super positive stuff. Like, everyone just wants to spin astrology and spirituality and that, like, oh, everything's good and everything's positive. It's like, I mean, like, yes, of course you could twist anything into a positive light. You can always learn a lesson, but like, most of life is like about suffering and how we overcome that, right? And I think just to deny that, shit can be difficult and deny that and just think that astrology is only like, a lot of people in my last week are like, you're way too negative and this and this and that. I'm really not negative here. I'm not just arguing with those people. So I know a lot of people come to my weeklies for like the real stuff, but this is just one of those things where, like, stop coming to spirituality for, a false hope. Cause like, there's a lot of charlatans in this world that will scam you into thinking, oh, life's going to be amazing and better. Give me your money. Let me tell you how it's going to be, how your dreams and everything's going to come true. And that's just not how it is. That's not how it is. I don't know how people can operate and do this type of shit and just think everything's going to be spiritual and great. It's not. In fact, most of me and a lot of other people get into this because life isn't going that good. And we're going, it's got to be the planets at this point, because what else could it be? Anyway, that's a different tangent. What I'm trying to say here is you got to be confronted with the truth. I think on Wednesday, you got to be confronted with how you feel. And again, life is like, that might be difficult for some people. That might be easier for some people. I don't really know. But anyway, we get back into Thursday. On Thursday, that's when we're going to be having the moon then ingress into Taurus, which I like for the moment, but it is going to square Saturn. So, it has its problems. But on Thursday, Venus goes opposite Uranus, which is so weird with the rest of the transits. Because if you look, full moon in Pisces, Mercury trine Jupiter, again, Libra stuff, Mars trine Saturn, Libra stuff, Aquarius stuff. But then Venus will go opposite Uranus on Thursday. I don't like that. Let's actually back it up a little bit. I don't like Venus opposite Uranus. And honestly, well, now that I'm kind of looking at it, it really does happen. I wrote it for Thursday. Oh, this is Thursday. My bad. This is Thursday. It happened super late Wednesday night going into Thursday, but you'll probably feel it mostly on Thursday. Venus, right? What we want, what we desire, what we like. It's in the sign of Mars. It's in Scorpio. Maybe we're doing things that we actually don't like, but finding pleasure in it. Like, there's so many things that, like, what's kind of like, what's the word? There's too many words nowadays. When you go without sex, what is it called? I don't remember what it's called. I'm thinking of every other word. Anyway, when you go without sex, right? A lot of people find more pleasure with that. They're like, I'm enjoying things more now that I'm denying myself a certain pleasure in a certain area. Same thing with like sobriety. It's very Venus and Scorpio, right? Venus is about like, hey, I like a certain thing. And it's ruled, and it's with Mars' tools, like, Venus and Scorpio likes the knives. Venus and Scorpio likes the guns. Venus and Scorpio likes the dark, intense stuff, right? But Venus is going to go opposite Uranus, where Uranus is in Taurus, right? Uranus is shaking things up. It's very volatile. It's in the sign of Venus. So things like aesthetics, things like security, things like food, things like literally like security, I think is one of the best ways to look at it. Things that are stable. Venus going opposite Uranus, you might do something a little unstable. You might do something a little edgy. Like, just because you like a certain haircut doesn't mean you should make an impulse decision to cut your hair. This is my big piece of advice. Don't be impulsive. It's not about being impulsive. I think if you're impulsive, I think you might regret it. Some of you might need to be impulsive and actually jump ship because some of you kind of need that little extra push, but most of you really don't. Venus opposite Uranus is, hey, it's going to, like, what you were used to being stable. And Venus is in Scorpio, what you're, if Venus is like, this is, if you find, for example, comfort food is such a great example because, like, that's so Taurus, right? The moon is exalted in Taurus, just wants to be comfortable and nourished. And Venus and Taurus, like, all these snacks and everything. It's like Venus and Scorpio is like, if your comfort food isn't comforting anymore, like, get rid of it. And I think Venus and Scorpio is like the things that make you comfortable aren't comfortable anymore. Venus is opposite Uranus. Like, if you're not comfortable, leave. If you're not comfortable, get out of there. And I think as all of this stuff is in Libra, while Venus is in Scorpio, this is really panicky, right? This is really, fight or flight type of stuff. You know what? And I kind of take that back now that I kind of think about this. Just because you're panicky, don't leave. I think Venus opposite Uranus is, you're going to feel like you need to get out of a situation. And just like, that might not be possible. I think with Venus opposite Uranus, you're going to want to be panicky. You're going to want to leave. Well, it's like all this, let's say you're on the witness stand and you're being questioned. And then and the prosecution starts saying, you know how the law stuff works. And they just start saying that shit. They just start going straight for the throat. And you could react, which is what they want you to do. This is why I'm bringing this up. They want you to react. They want you to confess. They want to throw you in prison. That's the prosecution's job. So they're going to egg you on to snitch on yourself and for you to get out of control, for you to get crazy. My challenge for you is don't get crazy. Don't let them win. Venus is going to be opposite Uranus. Do not react. It is going to be super easy to be reactionary, and reactions are just like, in my opinion, some of the fastest way to regret you can get. You want to be responsive, not reactionary. You can respond to things, not react to them. And I think as Venus is opposite Uranus, like, yo, you're on the witness stand, you're being seen in a different way, and that's not to say that that's not good or it has its good things, but this is like, you don't want to get you don't want to give them the reaction. Don't give them that. If you want to win this case, right? If you want to win this, battle, I'm sure some of you are actually like going through something like that, but like, don't react. Don't just, because you're uncomfortable, don't just scrap all of your hard work. Don't just throw everything away because of 1 second of an emotion, right? And Venus in Scorpio is fear. Like Venus in Scorpio is going with, and like you're talking to, my whole family is fucking addicts. I'm an addict. My whole family's that type of stuff of like literally needing pleasure, right? And seeking out pleasure wherever they can because they're scared because they have an insecurity because something happened, right? Like Venus in Scorpio is like, don't react to that stuff. Go, like, if you need, like, if you take your, okay, if you quit sugar, right? You're going to have a reaction to that. And you're going to go, fuck, I need even more sugar. And then you're going to, this is the same thing they talk about with alcoholics. It's like, if you sober up, but then relapse, you're going to hit that bottle even harder because you've gone without it and you're going to feel like, and you're just going to go even crazier with it. That's why you shouldn't react. Don't react to this stuff because it's going to be easier to overindulge and go super crazy into one way and just fucking be calm, man. Like, you just, I guess the best way to really look at this, and I don't want to say like this is just like a bad week or a bad, because it really isn't. It's just a bad day, not a bad life, right? And I think Venus opposite Uranus is just, it's uncomfortable, but you got to go through it. Don't avoid it. It's uncomfortable. And I think Venus opposite Uranus, you are going to kind of have to, it is going to be something that you will react to. It's going to be something that does destabilize something that you thought was stable, and it's not. And sometimes that's just how life goes. But rather than reacting and ruining it even more, just be patient and respond. The moon is going to go into Taurus, which is the second thing I wanted to say here is the moon's going to go into Taurus. Like, this isn't about reacting. This is about like, sometimes it's better to wait things out. Like moon and Taurus, be patient, be slow, because sometimes going about something at a very slow pace might make the effects wear off, right? Like you don't want to react. Well, it's the same reason why the cooling off phase, we're purchasing a gun. They're like, why would we let people go and purchase a gun when they're like a mad that day? It's like, I think a 90-day period in California where it's a cool down period. And then, they kind of hope that maybe after the cool down period, you won't kill people. Very understandable thinking. And it's good logic, I think, for most things in life is like, hey, just because you're angry, you don't need to go buy a gun. There's no reason you need a gun that day. You know what I mean? Wait a little bit. And I think that moon in Taurus, the moon's going to go into Taurus and square Saturn. It's the perfect time to wait. For example, if Venus is opposite Uranus and that moon square Saturn, like before you just react, something can happen, but just put it off for a little bit. Wait for a little bit. The moon's going to be squaring Saturn. Nothing's going to really move forward fast anyway. The moon's going to be in Taurus. Like you're not even going to want to do anything. The moon's going to be in Taurus. You're going to want to be kicking back and relaxing for the most part, right? But again, the moon's going to be in Taurus squaring Saturn. So there is going to be this uncomfortability. There is going to be this kind of like, okay, having to get out of your own way. But what I would say here is where this is on your side is taking things slow. There's no need to rush. Mars is in Libra. Mars is in Libra. Saturn's retrograde and slowing down a lot. The moon's in Taurus. Clearly on Thursday, we should go a little slow. Just a little slow. Anyway, that brings me to Friday. Friday, that moon is going to go opposite. Moon's going to conjoin Uranus, go opposite Venus. I don't know how I feel about this really. Because I think as the moon's conjoining Uranus and then goes opposite Venus, it's like there is kind of I think you'll make that decision of whether to, Venus is now opposite Uranus, right? That shocking reactionary moment is gone. But as the moon's conjoining Uranus opposite Venus, there is the sense of like, oh, that isn't stable anymore. This isn't what I want or what I value. And so the moon conjoining Uranus going like opposite Venus and Scorpio is like, hey, maybe you liked something, but then you didn't, and now you have to go back on something, which is okay. I just think with the moon conjoining Uranus is if you're going to do something that destabilizes, like this is one of those things is like, just rip off the Band-Aid, confront the issue where it is. You don't need to react. You don't need to piss people off. You don't need to hurt people's feelings, but the moon's going to be conjoining Uranus. You're going to probably be doing something a little unstable or at least destabilizing things. And I think as the moon goes opposite Venus and Scorpio, you kind of have to ask, like, I think the moon in Taurus wants to be comfortable, but as it's conjoining Uranus and opposite Venus and Scorpio, this is like, you ever try to go to sleep and like you get in your position, you're just like not comfortable. Maybe it's like too hot or your cortisol is up, so you're all stressed. Like You're going to try to find comfort and you're just not. And I think, it's like pulling off a Band-Aid. It's not comfortable pulling off a Band-Aid, but what are you going to do? Just let it sit there the whole time and get all gross? No, rip that shit off. That's that moon in Taurus opposite Venus and Scorpio on Friday, in my opinion. Friday, just like, you got to do it. You don't need to react in that moment, but you still got to do it. And you got to be grounded in that decision. You can't just flip-flop off stuff. Know how you feel. Check in with how, this is why I said like 15 minutes ago of like, you got to be aware right now. You've got to be self-aware of the shit that you're saying, the shit that you're going through. Mercury is still pretty much squaring Pluto. Mercury is now pretty much not moving, by the way. Like Mercury's about to go retrograde, right? Which brings us to Saturday. Mars trine Saturn. I talked about this last week, and I really don't like it, even though it is technically good. I just don't, and I'll explain why. But also on Saturday, when we get into this weekend, the moon's going to enter Gemini and conjoin the North Node, which I actually do like. And that is because on Saturday, what was the thing I was looking at? Mars trine Saturn. So here's the thing. Mars is all about, fights, conflicts, doing things, energizing, and it's in Libra. We're kind of focused, it's funny. Mars enters Libra. Mars rules my IC, and I just my apartment looks so aesthetic right now. I'm so happy. I'm also a moon in Libra, so like my space needs to be like even and nice looking. I also work from home. I can't live in a dirty space and work from it. But Mars in Libra is like taking actions based on the way that they look, based on like, the socialness of it. Like, is it going to create peace? Mars in Libra is like, hey, again, you're in a courtroom. It's like when you go to the court and someone's on trial for, like the white dudes who they're like, they were a big happy family until he murdered everybody. Like, and even they dress up like nice in court, which just, I don't know. It's just funny to me. But Mars in Libra is like, not necessarily about fighting and confronting, but being like, hey, what's going to make me look better? Because I know Mars, it's not about fighting things. It's about, how you're relating to other people, social dynamics, right? The sun is conjoining Mars. So Mars is what we say right now is underneath the beams of the sun. It's combust. It's on fire, which means you really don't know what Mars is doing. Or you may not know the repercussions of Mars's actions, right? Mars is combust. Mars is in Libra where it's like, hey, give me a bone. What can I do here? Mars is trining Saturn in Aquarius. We have learned what Saturn in Aquarius is because you have seen the ideological divide between the whole world on every issue, right? Very Saturn in Aquarius. You're either with us or against us type mentality. And I think as Mars is trining Saturn, there is this sense of like, hey, for example, when it comes to war, in fact, this actually just came on the news earlier today. I just saw this. The guy, I'm going to fuck this up, and I doubt any of you guys know. If there are people that know a lot about military stuff watching astrology, I'd be mind blown. But most of you probably don't, because I don't, so you guys will be able to go along with what I say. The top general guy, whoever that guy is, he pretty much when Trump got elected, one of the leaders in China pretty much gave this dude a call and was like, hey, are you guys just going to like randomly attack us at any point? Which I think is a really funny phone call. But the general guy was like, no, I will like let you guys know if we're going to attack you, which is also just another funny thing to say. But when it comes to like war and conflict, this is kind of one of those things of like, hey, I'm coming to you to settle something. I'm coming to you to make peace. Mars in Libra is like, hey, like hands up. I don't have like no guns or nothing. How can we make a deal? How can we create some peace here? How can we relate on some things? But because it's Mars, trining Saturn, there is this resistance. Mars is in Libra going, I don't want to do that. I don't. It's uncomfortable. Mars wants to fight, but Mars knows that's not really where it's supposed to be. And I think Mars in Libra trining Saturn is, I think, again, Mars is our actions and what we're doing, and it's in Libra. It needs to make sense. And it's trining Saturn like what we're doing is good. Mars trining Saturn is like doing things that will have longevity, doing things that make sense. Having the Mars is like our actions, right? And Saturn is like authority. Saturn is our disciplines, right? And I think as Mars trine Saturn, it's like, okay, what we're doing, the actions that we're taking are alleviating any, weight with, reality that we're dealing with, or, just that Saturn Aquarius stuff. So I think Mars trine Saturn is very like, hey, what can we do here? How can we go about this in a peaceful way without just, tearing each other apart? Which of course I think is really important. And what's important about this, and this is why I bring it up this way, is and the reason I think Mars trine Saturn may not be good is simply because Saturn is in the superior position and Mars is not. Mars isn't coming to Saturn because Mars wants peace. Mars is going to Saturn because Mars ain't got a fucking choice. Like, that's really the reality here. When Mars goes into Scorpio and square Saturn on November 10th, Mars has some shit to say, and Mars is going to have a much more room to work with when how it expresses itself. But Mars in Libra doesn't really have a choice here. Mars doesn't want to make this peace with Saturn, but it's one of those things where it's kind of like, if the U.S. as a military force were to instigate some other super weak country. I know that's a whole nother topic of a whole nother big thing. Anyway, if we were to do that, and let's say we were pissing this country off, and this country was like, fuck, well, we can't fight the American military, so I guess we will just find some peace. I guess we'll just work something out. Like, that's kind of like the Mars trine Saturn. It will work, but it's not on Mars's terms, which I just don't like, right? Like, it's not necessarily because, Mars is like, I want peace. Mars does not want peace. Mars wants to fight, right? But Mars is in Libra. It has to be peaceful. This is not the time for that. So this is good for creating peace, but just not on those terms that are necessarily like the terms that you want. So the way I would look at this is like, don't do anything you don't want to do, but you still have to be negotiable, right? It's all about negotiating. It's all about, what do they say in relationships? Give and take, the C word. What's the C word? Compromise. It's all about compromise. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest themes of this Mercury retrograde is how do we bring things together, right? Which leads us into Sunday. We get into Sunday. Oh, well, actually, that doesn't lead us into Sunday. This is what I meant to say is the moon's then going to go into Gemini on Saturday, right? And the moon's going to conjoin the North Node. Once there's that kind of olive branch of like, hey, for example, I made this analogy in my Mercury retrograde video, and I've said this to a lot of my clients. This Mercury retrograde is kind of like a settlement case. Like, hey, let's just settle. Let's just get this. Like, I'm fucking tired of fighting. Let's just settle this. Let's just handle it. And as the moon goes into Gemini on the North Node, it's like, cool, you want to settle? Now we could talk business. Now we could talk shop. Now we can actually lay things out because the moon's going to go into Gemini. It's going to trine the sun. It's going to trine Saturn. It's going to trine Mars. And then as we go into next week, it's going to trine Mercury and all that stuff. So a lot of things really start to move forward going into Saturday night because of the Mars Libra thing, right? Which then brings us into Sunday. Sunday, moon is still going to be trining Saturn going into the most of the day. And then the moon's going to be trining Mars. Oh, I mean, my bad. The moon's going to trine Saturn and then trine Mars. My bad. I said that. I read that completely wrong. So we go into Sunday. The moon's going to then trine Saturn, trine Mars and Gemini. We're talking. We're communicating. Ideas are going around, right? This is much more in flow with things. Yes. Now, and what I like about this is Venus is off of Uranus. Venus is going to start trining Neptune, which you guys know, I've said this. I love, even if Venus is in Scorpio, and you guys know me, I always talk bad about Neptune, but Venus trining Neptune, kind of like it. Little fun. It's fun to get lost in feelings and to like in the good stuff, right? But that's a topic that we'll talk about next week. But we end the week off with Sunday, this moon trining Mars and Gemini. We're thinking, we're expressing, and just the ball really starts to move, and things really start to move forward, I think, on Sunday, which is a little counterintuitive because later Sunday night, Mercury is going to retrograde. So all of the stuff that we were going over, we're going to come back over again. But that leads us to next week. Next week, Mercury stations retrograde. Technically, it's Sunday night, but I can't have a weekly horoscope labeled Mercury stations retrograde when it does on Sunday. That's for next week. So Mercury stations retrograde Sunday night going into next week. Next week, we also have Venus trining Neptune. Like Venus and Scorpio trining Neptune and Pisces it's kind of toxic, but it's fun, But then we have Venus squaring Jupiter too, which Venus squaring Jupiter honestly isn't the biggest deal in the world. And it's not the worst transit, but it's definitely like something to talk about, which of course we will get to next week. That's this week for you guys. Let me know how you guys feel about this. I want to know what you guys are going through as well. October horoscopes are now posted on my Patreon. If you want to know what's going on in October for you, they're already up. In fact, for the patrons that are listening to this that go all the way to the end, I'm working on 2022 year ahead horoscopes for each zodiac sign. Those will be posted on my Patreon sometime in October, and they're not going to be released onto YouTube until sometime in November. So if you really want some really early access to those, go ahead and become a patron as well. I did a video about every major transit of 2022 it's on my Patreon right now. So if you want to know about every major transit of 2022 so you could start planning of next year, go to my Patreon. Like, it's already there. And that video is going to be in tandem to each individual zodiac sign horoscope for 2022. So like, that's already there. You can already get that stuff started as well. If you want to know what the Venus retrograde is going to be like, I just posted a video last week about what has happened the last 2 times Venus has stationed retrograde in Capricorn. So we can get better ideas of what's going to happen this next time around. I think I am also going to just be putting more exclusive content on my Patreon. I feel much more as a content creator, and because astrology is talking a lot about certain, all of the political stuff, I don't always feel confident or very safe just saying everything on YouTube. So I like that I have a space to where I could just say what I want to say, what I need to say, and you guys can kind of have access to that. But yeah, and then also too, my podcast, I think I'm going to go back down. I think I'm going to go to like 1 episode a month because those are starting to become very challenging because I'm also wanting to do other content and I got other stuff going on. But that's something that I know I haven't posted an episode in a minute, but yeah, that's something that's going on in the works too. But anyway, also, if you just want to know what's going to go on, book a reading with me. I do readings, and in fact, I'm pretty good at it. If you're my client and you've gotten a reading from me before, please let people know how much you enjoyed it, or maybe even didn't enjoy it in the comments below. But if you do want to know what's really going on for you, you can watch horoscopes all day long, but truly just get a professional reading because an astrologer is really going to be able to go over all the specifics of your chart and how exactly it's all going down. Yeah, book a reading with me. I want to read your chart and I want to get you guys ready for this winter and this spring because there's a lot of shit going on, a lot of bad stuff this winter, but a lot of great stuff this spring and summer. So I think I will leave you with that. I think that's everything I wanted to say. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for being here, liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you, and I'll be seeing you next week.